St. Bonaventure Catholic Church in Huntington Beach, California presents
Rebuilt and Renewed,
Bringing the Word Home.
Thanks for listening in to Rebuilt and Renewed. In our summer special for the month of July, we continue our conversation on family life with Brad Strom and Pam Hurwitz. This week, we continue our conversation on the importance of tradition and setting apart our lives as a family as a sacred space.
I remember being at your house once when you had a little table set up. I think it was for Karen, and had pictures, and just sitting there, just simple, just setting a little space, almost like a little altar, a little, and you had pictures, and she just couldn't wait to show them to me of when she received her baptism, and I want to say one other thing that has always stuck out to me. I'll never forget about you, Brad. The first time I came to your house. Okay. So the first time I came to Brad's house, he has 4 children, and they're our regular family, and I hadn't been in a younger family's home for a while. And so you just walk in and you remember, okay. As you
controlled chaos.
Yes. As you start, tripping over, the toys
Legos.
or this. Legos, yes. But I also remember
Hot Wheels. That's what we're doing. We still have Hot Wheels saved that people play with when they come over. The young ones. So.
But I remember that there was this room to the left that was very peaceful, okay, and untouched.
Yeah, clean.
Somewhat. Clean. And I remember kind of like wondering, it's kind of not exactly like the rest, and so I think I asked you, and this was your prayer room in your home, and that's
also known as the living room. Yeah. It's where we prayed.
And he was saying, my wife and I get up every morning and begin our day there, and they had some, and I just thought, oh my God, if I did that every day, if I had a specific space to go sit with my husband and, read, just how different the rest of the day would look. And so
Suzanne is a very faithful prayer.
Okay.
I have not been getting up in the morning lately. I'll be honest. I want to be realistic about this. So I've been having actually a really hard time lately getting up and praying in the morning. But I still find time to pray throughout the day. But it can get really hard to do that.
Yeah.
But I'm trying. Yeah. And our kids know that that's the room where we would host our small faith group. That's the room where we would pray and do pray. And we pray in all the rooms, but in the morning we would get up and go there. But it's important to know, for the kids to know, that prayer is important to us, and prayer is important to anyone who wants to follow Christ. And
I think it can be as simple as, I think it's, the intention of having a space, but I think for today's parent, it is literally as simple as, being at a playground and sitting and watching your child pray. That there's a holiness in that, that to sit and realize, like, oh my God, like I've been given this. I get to do this. It is very, very holy. And what is happening, unfortunately, and it's harder and harder for me too, is the dang phone, so it's just like you're like, oh, I was telling another story that my son, who I'm always trying to connect with, was home. He's home from college now, and we were watching the Super Bowl together, and I was like so excited, like this, oh my gosh, we're having mom and daughter time, mom and son time, And my husband, so the three of us were on, and I had all these great snacks, and and I was sitting there and really having a moment of just like, we were talking and we were laughing together and just thinking like one of those like, this is really rich. This is really good. I'm really, and then, the game continued, and, and I kind of started thinking like, oh my gosh, like I should go do a load of laundry right now. I mean, I could be, or I need to answer some emails or whatever. And then, but I had to like literally tell myself like, no, Pam, what you need to do right now, the only thing you need to do right now is to sit and be present and just enjoy being in this moment with the people you love the most. And that is getting harder and harder to do.
Yeah.
Embracing those moments when they happen.
Yeah.
And recognizing them too is good as well. Opportunities for those.
And that's prayer there, just to, yeah.
And that gathering box, how many different opportunities or I think it's highlighting opportunities too.
Yes.
You may not recognize an anniversary or, a
Monday.
There's a Monday. Yeah.
Yes.
Celebrating a Monday. Who does
Yeah.
that? I mean, maybe I do because I don't know. Well, usually not. But I want to go back real quick to baptism. As a priest, I don't do many as a priest, unfortunately, but as a deacon, I did a lot of baptisms. And nobody drowned, so we're good. And not yet, so I'm happy for that. But there's one part in the baptismal ritual that I asked the parents, if they know what they're getting themselves into, basically. I said, I asked them something like this, are you ready to embrace becoming the primary catechist of your children, the primary educators of your children? And of course, every single family has always said, yes, I do. And then I tell them in the homily, I said, do you guys know what I just got you into, And because most people freak, and they think that being the primary catechist is you got to have the information like I do as a priest. I have 2 master's degrees in theology. You don't have to have 2 master's degrees in technology, maybe that, in theology in order to give faith to children. Like God's not asking us of that, and the church is not asking us of that. What the church is asking us to do as parents and as a family is to share our relationship with Jesus with them. And as they're seeing you pray, you're sharing your relationship with Jesus with them.
Yeah.
As they see you make an intentional decision to forgive, they're seeing Jesus shared with them. And so we can resource people with ideas about catechism and the teachings of the church, understandings of the Trinity, and all of these kind of things. Like, we'll help with that. But what we can't do and what we can't supply for in the life of a family are the moments where it becomes flesh.
Yeah.
Where it goes, Jesus becomes incarnate and walks in your house through you guys.
Yeah.
And I think that's such an important piece. Like, that's what God is asking of us, is to allow my faith to be shared in a way that just comes out of my heart. What's the first thing we do when Aunt Susie dies? Do we sit down as a family and do we say a prayer together?
Yeah.
That can teach more things about mourning the loss of a loved one than anything we'll ever say to them later, anything I could ever say as a priest to them later.
Yeah.
It's amazing. Yeah. Just that example of saying, and then what did I do? And I think back, what did I do when I was a kid when that happened? I'm going to do that now.
Yeah.
And immediately when we're in that place of needing that, like it's the earthy example stuff that just sticks in people's lives. The good and the bad, right? Both of it does. And we have such an opportunity, I think, in our homes to also be people who, like, even when it does turn bad, to stop and gather everyone together and say, we can reconcile, and we're going to reconcile with each other.
Yeah.
And that's a real thing, because when we can teach each other that, then we're not so afraid of moving forward and living our lives again, knowing that we're broken people, and probably that's going to happen again maybe sometime in the future. And it probably will. And it definitely will happen.
And
Yeah.
go ahead.
I was just going to say, one of the things that's really stuck with me, so my wife and I help out with the Marriage in the Lord program at our parish. So once a year we help married couples do their weekend retreat. And one of our deacons spoke about what he called the liturgy of the family. And so in church we have a liturgy, right? Peace be with you and with your spirit, and that, there's a set liturgy, there are responses. And so in the family we have the same thing. It's I love you too. I'm sorry, I forgive you, and if we can remember that, there is a liturgy that can help us, even when we don't want to feel like we're sorry for doing something. My saying I'm sorry to my wife for whatever I did, and her saying, I forgive you, is something that the kids are going to remember seeing and hearing. And it's an example for them of our love for each other, the sacrifices we make for each other and for them, and an example of God's love to them. And that's the first way they learn it. They're not going to go to theology classes at our house, that might be later, but the first feeling of God's love is going to be through their family at home. So,
which is most important,
Yeah.
and most foundational.
And the first places that they'll learn, because we have the sacrament of reconciliation, but they first learn how to reconcile, in our homes, and how to forgive, how to have mercy, how to have grace. All those things. And I think that's the most beautiful thing family does is it teaches us how to give ourselves to someone else, and we have to do it so because in these four walls, there's no other place that we have to go back and sleep that night. We have to figure it out, okay? We have to figure it out. And so we learn how to live with people who have behavior issues, who have, addiction, all different kinds of things going on, because there is this love, this bond that just says we do it here. And then when we learn how to do it there, then we learn how to give ourselves away outside of there. And then so that's what I think is critical, is that, this idea that Jesus really came to teach us how to do relationship. He came to teach us how to love other people. And we as a family get to really begin that and show our kids the basics of that. And then they in turn, get to learn how to give themselves away outside of there. And
loving out of a place.
Yes.
Of that as well.
Yes.
And knowing that they come home to a safe place that is a reconciling place, that is a loving place, a supportive place. It's really hard to love people in the world if we're not receiving love in our families.
Yeah.
It's near impossible.
Yeah.
It's just not,
Yes.
What you said about the liturgy of the family, it struck me. There's also a deacon up in Northern California who did this practice. Maybe we can add to it and we can turn this into something. Hey, what? He said that what he decided to do with his family is that his home, he said they decided to call it a sanctuary. And so when they come into the house, there's this space right in the front of the house. They take off their shoes.
I love that.
As like a ritual gesture of leaving the world outside.
Yeah.
And their home is a sanctuary, and they treat people different in sanctuaries. They decided that when you're in this place, we're going to treat each other with the dignity that is afforded to us by God.
That's
and so just
fantastic.
having that ritual gesture of removing shoes, leaving them outside, entering the Holy of Holies, right? That took the shoes off. Moses took the shoes off in front of the burning bush. If you see some priests, and I did this in front of the cross on Good Friday, priests to take off their shoes before veneration in the holy ground. This is a holy place. Something different happens here than happens outside in the crazy of the world, And when we can have that ritual gestures, it's so funny. If I go into a room of Catholics and I say, "The Lord be with you," immediately they will all say, "And with your spirit."
Yeah.
Even though we're not in the Mass.
Yeah.
Because we're
Programmed.
we're programmed to that. And I think
We're ritualizing.
Yeah, it's a ritual.
Yeah. I mean, we're programming our families
Yeah.
to say, "I love you." Or
Yes.
we're programming our families to respond in a way, and it is a programming. A programming in virtue. That's what
Yeah.
virtue is. It needs to be
Yeah.
programmed.
Yeah.
Vice is equally programmed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In an easier maybe way, than a lot less work than virtue. But I think there's such a value there, and I just want to affirm that, because I think it's so important in our families to know that those things take root. And I know in my life, sometimes when I get stressed or later in life, I said I'd never say that thing my dad did, and all of a sudden here it comes out of my mouth.
Yes.
And I'm like, where did that come from? And I'm
Yeah.
like, you know exactly where that came from, because I was hearing that, I was living in the midst of that,
Mm-hmm.
And none of our families are perfect,
No, yeah.
And I think knowing that everything that we speak and everything that we do is forming the people around us, as fathers, as mothers, as siblings, and all of those kind of things, and we can make that choice. I think when we come home to say, we're going to model love here.
Mm-hmm.
As for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. And really claiming that space as some other thing set apart A sanctuary is set apart, something that is set apart from the rest of our lives, knowing that something else happens here, you know?
Yeah.
Like the sanctuary in a church is set apart because that's where the Eucharist is celebrated. That's where Jesus becomes flesh, you know? And in some ways, our homes are also the place where Jesus becomes flesh in these encounters that we're having with each other. And how awesome that can be if, you know, just to see it like that too. I think sometimes when we see a structure in it a little bit, it helps us rather than it just being a haphazard thing, you know?
No, I love that image. I love that image of leaving your shoes, you know, and that the noise and chaos will find us again in the morning soon enough, you know, but for now, you know, we're sanctified, we're set apart, you know, in here we're set apart. I also was thinking when you were saying parents is just the incredible opportunity of grandparents.
Yeah, amen.
Yes. And so last night was Father's Day, and we got together with my bigger family, which is I have 3 brothers, and they all have boys, lots and lots of boys. We have lots of boys. And you know, my dad, he always takes the opportunity to continue to lead, you know. I mean, he, you know, we just, and I watched last night, I don't know, I just had a moment where I watched how the children listened to him in a different way. You know, you know, they're talking over their aunts and uncle, you know, but when Grandpa gets up, you know, or Grandma gets up to say something, you know, and so just the fact too that we have these legacies of people who have walked in faith and how important it is to have them continue to speak into the lives of our kids and our families. And I don't know, that just really, last night I was just thinking like, oh my gosh, just grandparents have such an opportunity to really tell their stories, and our kids listen in a different way. I mean, it's funny because my kids, they adore my mom and dad, and my brothers, we laugh because we're like, no, these aren't the same people that raised us. You don't understand. They're nice now. I know they seem funny. We don't get it either. Okay, but okay.
Skips a generation.
Yes. So, but another beautiful layer, like we have layers in the church with the priesthood and all that, you know, but a beautiful layer that I think we need to really can empower if you're not using that in your families, or to find, you know, mentors or things like grandparents, but just how, you know, grandparents keep parents in check. And then they also, you know, love on their kid. You know, they also really speak into the lives of our kids. So,
yeah.
I was at the World Meeting of the Families a couple years back with all of our seminarians, which was a crazy trip. I will never plan another trip for that many people. But Pope Francis said this crazy thing on Saturday night at the Festival of Families, they call it. And he said that grandparents are the memory of the family.
Oh, yes.
And the children are the strength.
Oh,
interesting. That's great.
And it profoundly touched me because literally the next week I came back and my grandmother was in the hospital, and she died the next week. And there we are, bedside, and you know, her grandchildren are there and great grandchildren are there, and so I'm there and like holding her hand, and she can't really speak or anything, but she's somehow like mysteriously passing on like the completion of what the memory was, you know, and is. And then not even moments later, like pops open the door. My niece runs in the room. She was, I mean, I don't even know how old at that time, maybe 6 years old, you know, or 5 maybe even. She runs in the room and she like jumps up on me and she gives me the strongest hug ever. And she's like, I'm going to give you the strongest hug you ever had, you know, and she just holds on tight. And it was just like this moment where that was lived out like in this hospital room. And it tripped me out just seeing that so beautifully. And I think if we can identify that, like the value of our grandparents, you know, goes through the roof. They're not just people that we just, you know, have to take care of until they die, you know, and the burden that they can be on us. And in a world that is starting to progressively go in that direction of saying, well, I don't want to be a burden on my family. It's like, you're a blessing on your family.
Yes.
And claim, like you said, claim that voice as well.
Yes.
Like I listened to, and my grandma was the first one before any of my family said to me that she would support me in whatever vocation I chose. And they have that kind of freedom to speak those type of things.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
And I think it's such a beautiful thing to claim as a grandparent, to just to be able to speak those kind of truths and those kind of enduring things into the life of your children. And they're not going to forget that. Like I'll never forget those moments and that. So even though there are difficulties in caring for people in all stages, one of the things is that kind of passing on of this generational information.
Yeah.
Like that happens in and through our families. It doesn't happen other places. The best investment that we can make is in our lives together of faith as a family. This week, we're happy to invite you to our first family event here at St. Bonaventure. We're calling it Better Together because our lives are more meaningful when we join together around our one faith in our God, to be strengthened and to be formed in love and in faith and encouragement to one another. Our event will be on Sunday, July 11th from 3 p.m. to 8 p.m. in the Duffy Center. And we'll start with some games and some music to loosen us up. And then Pam Hurwitz from our podcast here will be sharing with us a little talk about Family Crest. And then we'll be creating a Family Crest with each other. And after that, we're going to go to the 5 o'clock Mass with each other to worship our God and to draw closer to the Lord together as a family. And family of faith, larger than just our families, but our family of faith here at St. Bonaventure. Then after that, my dad is actually coming to barbecue for us. And so he's going to bring out his big barbecue, and we're going to have a nice picnic barbecue outside over back at the Duffy Center and picnic tables there. And while we're eating, we'll have an opportunity for some field games with our kids, so some time to socialize with our parents. And then we're going to conclude the evening with what we call the s'more prayer. So come on out. We invite you to join us that day and just ask you to RSVP so we know how much food to make sure we have enough craft materials for everybody that day. Please email Danielle Payton over in the RE office at danielle@stbonaventure.org. That's danielle@stbonaventure.org. And just let her know how many people are coming and what your family name is. Thank you for joining us on this episode, and we look forward to continuing next week our conversation on the family. Until next time, thanks for listening in to
Rebuilt and renewed.
Bringing the word home.